And we're on a small computer. Oh no, that's not good. So we're here to talk about public performance rights. Yeah, so here we go. Oh, Jesus. Good start. I feel like Paul. All right, cool. So, yeah.
So the right of public performance is one of the exclusive rights that's guaranteed by the bundle of rights through copyright law. And so what this slide is doing is it's basically using the actual copyright law to define the term of public. So public is considered to perform or display a piece that's open to the public, where there's a substantial number of people, and it specifies that it's outside of a normal circle of family or social acquaintances. So the book relays that this could be like one person playing in a cafe, that's still a public performance, whereas if you're at a wedding with 500 guests, it's not a public performance because it's your family and your acquaintances, basically. So that means that the number of people there doesn't determine whether or not it's a public space, if that makes sense. And then this slide also is telling you that basically movie theaters aren't considered a public performance. Later they decided that was considered reproduction instead. And then also it's talking about streaming under the little one at the end, that part. It's basically saying a public performance can be through a device. So that would be like the internet, basically.
Word. So yeah, there's that. So now we're going to go into the timeline of PROs. So yeah. So to start off, my laptop died, but I'm going to try to say this. So the first PRO was actually founded in France because a dude named Ernest Bourget walked into a restaurant and basically like heard his music playing and got really mad, and he was like, why are y'all making money off me whenever I'm having to pay for food from y'all, basically. So he didn't pay for his food, and then like it wound up going to like this group of people, and they wound up forming the Société des auteurs. Basically, it's the Society of Authors, Composers, and Publishers of Music is what it Englishly translates to. But yeah, so that's where it all kind of started. This was in the 1850s. And so yeah, oh, there you go. Look, we getting messages. So yeah, here in America, we put it in English because it makes more sense that way for us. So the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, also known as ASCAP, I think is how you would say that. But yeah, in 1914, it came about because this group of guys, they basically same kind of thing. Dude Herbert walked into a restaurant and like heard his music being performed. So it's a little different because it's not just being played, it's being performed. And so that's more the like public performance aspect of it. So he took it to court and just kind of wound up breaking an amendment that happened in 1909. And it basically what the amendment said was that the performance rights are different than the mechanical rights, which are basically just like the music itself, the ownership of the publishing, and the song itself. And so it kind of combined that together to where artists can make, publishers and writers can make money off of their products through their entirety. So yeah, moving forward. Yeah, so then BMI came about. Wait, did we jump something here? No, we didn't. Okay, so BMI came out. It was a group of broadcasters who were unhappy about the fact that CSAC basically had like a monopoly on music because just of how they were selling their music out, I guess. So BMI went after race music, quote unquote, which was basically just like people of color and that whole thing, people that weren't being played on the radio and stuff, and they basically signed a whole bunch of them to where they could be competitive and sell out more music. And with that tactic, now like they represent over 400,000 artists of all genres. So yeah. So big breakdown of like the three major PROs. BMI and ASCAP are just bigger by far now at this point, and they're nonprofit organizations, whereas CSAC's smaller and it's privately owned and it's a for-profit business. So even though they're ran on different like business theories and like mindsets, they still basically have the same goal, which is to get music and then publish that music and distribute the royalties based off of like how they set it up through their contracts and whatnot. Um, so yeah, joining a PRO. So this is gonna be like a lot of stuff. I'm not gonna lie, but it's really, if you want to pause it, look, it's actually kind of useful, I think. So if a writer or a publisher is trying to be involved with a PRO, you can only be involved with one. So that means basically like if you're going with ASCAP, you like have to write for ASCAP and you can't give or write for CSAC at all. You can change later on, but when you're working for one, you're working for that one. And the same goes for publishers. If you're an ASCAP publisher, you can't publish for CSAC or BMI. You can apply through their websites, which I think is pretty cool. All you gotta do is just like basically give like 5 different names to go off of to make sure that it's not similar to anyone else and the royalties go to you. If you look on like YouTube and stuff, you can, or not YouTube, but Spotify, you can see people like John Cash, like it kind of seems like they're kind of trying to play off of like Johnny Cash and like get money off of that. And then there's a band, Fish with an F, that's a thing. Not knocking anybody. I know those people are kind of from Harrisburg maybe, but it is what it is. If you're applying as a writer though, it's best to apply as a writer and a publisher, just so that way you can make sure that all the royalties you are like eligible for, you're getting. And then once you like establish a membership, your name's confirmed, all that good stuff, you can go ahead and go to the website and you can like register your songs, check the catalog for like what you have, what is published for you. You can look at bank statements and like whatever else the specific PRO offers. So yeah, registering a song. So the important part about this is mostly just to make sure that you know where the money's going, on like a basis of like money, I guess. But in the registration process for a song, you just have to have the song title, writers, shares, and yeah, all this stuff that's listed right there. I'm sure y'all can see that right there. Boom. But yeah, just in order to verify where the money goes, a publisher has to have the artist name registered to the song. So if you never register your song, you'll never get money off of it. If you never claim that you did work, you'll never make money off of it. So that's just something to always make sure you do whenever you're releasing music. So yeah, this part was kind of like shaky. I'm not gonna lie. I don't get how you can get 200% of anything, but except for work. But historically, publishers or writers will split things 50-50. ASCAP and CSAC use the 100% system, so 50% to publisher, 50% to writer. The book says that BMI uses a 200% system. I kind of attribute that, I guess, to the fact that they're a nonprofit, but I don't see why the other nonprofit wouldn't be. But basically, they give 100% to publisher and 100% to writer. So, Paul, if you want to kind of break that down a little bit more, that'd be pretty cool. If the numbers aren't met, like if 50% publisher and 50% writer is not a thing, then the PRO just does not accept the work. Broadcast music, no matter when it's created, so throughout any time, even after copyright, I guess, which is kind of weird to me. I have to explain that more. You'll still earn money off of it. They call it mailbox money because, you know, it just shows up in your mailbox and you don't have to work for it or anything at that point. And then for my final slide, we're going to talk about monitoring the use of music. So once again, the book said that this was just like a very like rudimentary base of like how they do it. So basically just expect all this on larger scales. But so one way they do it is through census. So it's like anywhere that is broadcasted. So through cable TV, whatever, ESPN, local television stations, 24/7, 365 days a year, those things are constantly being tracked. And I don't know if it's AI or if they're actually paying somebody to do it. I imagine it's AI, but who knows. Yeah, and then the payments determined off of like when it happens and like how it was performed. And then survey. So stations report their programming and music for a sampled period of time. So ultimately, if you're going to say rush hour in Hattiesburg on Hardy Streets from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock. So they'll look at when a song's played throughout that on a top 40 chart, on whatever, and they'll kind of use that as a basis to go off of different areas and different hotspots of music. Obviously, they're not going to do Hattiesburg. It'll be more like LA, New York, or wherever. But that's how they break down the surveys. So yeah, like I said, that's very simplified. But yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about blanket versus per program licenses. So basically, the rates that PROs charge TV and radio stations are set through negotiations. So BMI and ABSCAP have to basically go before the court and prove that whatever rates they're charging are fair for usage. And CSAC isn't subject yet to rates courts, but it's currently like in the works to receive the same treatment because they are using it in the same way. But for national networks, PROs basically issue what they call a blanket license that allows like the entire catalog, whatever songs that are registered with that PRO, to be played publicly on that network for a year. So if you know you're going to be using a lot of the songs out of a specific catalog, you would use a blanket license to cover you for the whole year, just as a more, I guess, economical way to do things. And that's versus a per program license. So a smaller station that's maybe not necessarily using a whole lot of super popular songs may pay per program. So that's basically paying for the individual programs that play the music. So you have to list out the programs that utilize the music from that PRO, and then you pay whatever their per program fee is. So we said like car insurance, like the less you drive, or like if you drive less than the average, your rate will be lower. So it's kind of like that, where if you're playing less songs, your rate's going to be lower because you're only using certain songs in certain programs. And then the per program fee, the book said, is the blanket rate divided by 24 hours and then multiplied by 140. So if y'all want to figure out that math, go ahead. So next we're going to talk about source licensing versus direct licensing. So source licensing is coming from the PRO, whereas direct licensing is whenever the PRO isn't involved, and instead like a network or a station reaches directly out to the writer or the producer or the publisher, whoever owns it, and asks to receive the rights directly from them. So this may be used when you're trying to negotiate a price of some kind for the licensing fee. So it could be beneficial or detrimental just because it may be less or more than what the PRO could get you. And then you're, as I said, negotiating with the owner of the music. And then if the direct license is chosen, they have to notify the PRO of the license, because if they don't, then the PRO might charge them the license fee, and it's like a double payment basically. So next we're going to talk about electronic detection methods. So as we said, like music played versus like on streaming and all that stuff is also considered a public performance, and so they have to monitor it on television, radio, and streaming. So for television and radio, they use watermarking and fingerprinting. So watermarking is basically when you embed a digital identifier directly into the recording of the composition. Whereas fingerprinting takes the unique fingerprint or like the waveform or whatever, and it gives it a tag so that it can be identified in the future. And then that like fingerprint is registered basically, and that data is used to recognize a song. So an example of this would be Shazam. So when you Shazam a song, it's trying to look for its like audio, like waveform or fingerprint. And all three of the PROs use fingerprint technology to identify their songs and track them, just because it's easier. There are some limitations to fingerprinting, so obviously not every recording ever has been analyzed. I know I have Shazam songs where it just doesn't come up. As well as sampling, it may pick up a sample from one song and think it's a different song, all that good stuff. Or if you're like in a busy place and there's people talking or there's sound effects over the music, it may create like dirty audio is what the book calls it, and it's hard for it to recognize. Or if somebody's performing a song live, it may not recognize the song because it sounds like a different person, or the like waveform would look different because somebody different is singing it. And then the last one is like technologies. You have to be able to play the song for a certain amount of time for it to recognize the song in the first place. So if you only have 5 seconds left of a song, it's probably not going to be able to recognize it just from those last 5 seconds. So performing rights in the internet. So as we said, streaming audio or audiovisual content is a public performance of music. So that means like websites, even like iTunes, where it gives you the 30-second preview before a song, even them are paying streaming licenses because it's a public performance. So they specify that there's 2 different types of streaming audio. So interactive is when you have complete control over what you want to hear. So this would be more expensive for fees because users are able to directly choose, like on Spotify. When you pay for Spotify Premium, you're probably helping them pay their licensing fees, to be honest. And then non-interactive is when you get to choose like a genre or a station of some kind, but you don't get to choose the actual songs. So this is Pandora, things like that. And the reason why Spotify's radio isn't considered that is because you still, if you're paying for premium, you have an unlimited number of skips. You can still choose which song on the radio station to play. So that's the difference. And then there's been sort of an interesting issue that's come up with radio stations, like actual radio stations, and that's when they simulcast, so they're casting over the air and on the website. It's now considered a global transmission because it's through the internet, so they would have to pay the fee for non-interactive licensing fee as well as their fee for just playing it over the air. And then lastly, they've basically said that downloads are not considered streaming because you're paying for it, so it's a reproduction instead. And then the last section was on foreign performance royalties. So it's basically talking about how royalties are like taken in other countries. So royalties are still collected through performance rights organizations or societies in each territory. So most major territories have their own PRO, and these PROs kind of basically do the same thing that the United States ones do. They license performing rights to radio stations, TV stations. The difference is they also do movie theaters in other countries. And then they monitor all of those broadcasts and try and figure out the value of those performances. And then they monitor live music in like public performance venue spaces like concert halls, clubs, sports stadiums, all that stuff, like in the US. And then I'm going to do my best to explain this one. So this is basically how the performance royalties are like collected in foreign countries. So instead of splitting it 50-50, there's a further division later on. So they split it like 12 out of 12, I guess. So 6 out of 12, or half, of the royalties are paid by the local performing rights society, and that's paid directly to the United States PROs. And this is like the writer's share. So there's the publisher's share and the writer's share. And this is the writer's share. And so the U.S. societies then take that money from the foreign performing rights organizations and pay it to the writers directly, whereas the last 50% is considered the owners and the sub-publisher's share of the performance. So the share is paid 100% to the sub-publisher, and then if you're using a sub-publisher, the foreign performing rights organization will take their share of the royalties, and then they'll give the rest to the sub-publisher. So that's like, the publisher's share, I guess. But if there's no sub-publisher, foreign PRO sends the publisher's share directly to the domestic PRO to distribute it to the publisher. So, yeah, and we have a couple of links here at the end that we used throughout it, but that's our presentation. Our questions. So our first question relates to public performance, obviously. So if an electronic music artist basically samples another song live in his set, and this performance is covered by the venue's blanket license, but then he later adds the remix to Spotify and it's taken down. So why might it be able to be performed live but be taken down from Spotify? And then our second question is a little bit more basic, but it's what is the difference between watermarking and fingerprinting?